Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So late one evening, a priest is hearing confessions in a quiet church. Someone enters the confessional booth but says nothing. The priest, puzzled, waits patiently for them to speak. After a few minutes, he coughs softly to prompt a response, but there's still silence. A few minutes later, he coughs again, only to hear a loud fart from the other side. Growing curious, the priest knocks on the confessional grill and asks, "Is anyone in there?" "Yes, there is," slurs a drunken voice. "But don't bother asking. There's no toilet paper in this one either." So a lawyer sold his well to an old man. 2 days later, the lawyer came to the old man and said, "Sir, I sold you the well, but it's not with the water inside. If you want to use the water, you will have to pay extra." The old man smiled and replied, "Yes, I was about to come to you. I was going to say that you should take your water from my well, or else you will have to start paying rent from tomorrow." So an admiral visits one of his ships and joins the crew for tea. He notices every biscuit is embossed with the ship's insignia and is impressed. Curious, he summons the cook and asks, "How do you manage to put the insignia on these biscuits?" The cook grins and says, "It's simple, sir. When I roll out the dough, I press each biscuit against my belt buckle before baking them." The admiral frowns. "That's rather unhygienic, isn't it?" "In that case, sir," the cook replies, "I'd suggest skipping the donuts." So 2 statues were standing in the park. One, a nude man, and one, a nude woman. They had been facing each other across a pathway for 100 years. One day, an angel comes down from the sky and with a single gesture brings the 2 to life. The angel tells them, "As a reward for being so patient through 100 blazing summers and dismal winters, you have been given life for 30 minutes to do what you've wished to do the most." He looks at her. She looks at him. They go running behind the shrubbery. The angel waits patiently as the bushes rustle and giggling ensues. After 15 minutes, the 2 return, out of breath and laughing. The angel looks at his watch. You have 15 minutes left. Would you care to do it again?" He asks her, "Shall we?" She eagerly replies, "Oh, yes, let's. But we should change positions. This time, I'll hold the pigeon down and you shit on its head." So my friend passed away, and at his grave, I said, "Bro, I really miss you. My wife has been pregnant for 7 months now. How about you reincarnate as my child?" 2 months later, my wife gave birth to a big boy. As my child grew older each day, I realized he looks a lot like my best friend. I'm really happy that my prayer worked. So, the judge says to the defendant, "On the 3rd August, you're accused of killing your wife by beating her to death with a hammer. How do you plead?" "Guilty," said the man in the dock. At this point, a man at the back of the court stood up and shouted, "You dirty rat!" The judge asked the man to sit down and to refrain from making any noise. The judge continued, "And that also on the 17th September, you are accused of killing your son by beating him to death with a hammer. How do you plead?" "Guilty," said the man in the dock. Again, the same man at the back stood up and shouted even louder, "You dirty, rotten, stinking rat!" At this point, the judge called the man to the bench and said, "I have already asked you to be quiet. If you continue with these outbursts, I will have to charge you with contempt of court." I can understand your feelings, but what relationship do you have with this man? He replied, He's my next-door neighbor. The judge replied, I can understand your feelings then, but you must refrain from any comments. The man replied, No, Your Honor, you don't understand. Twice, I have asked if I could borrow a hammer, and both times, he said he didn't have one. So my wife was looking in the mirror and asked me, do I look fat in these pants? I reply, do you promise not to get mad no matter what I say? She said, yes. So I said, I slept with your sister. So a wealthy man, a bit drunk after losing big at the casino, stumbles to his car. A beggar approaches him and says, Sir, could you spare some money? The rich man pats his pockets and replies, Sorry, I've got no cash on me, but how about this bottle of fine Scotch whiskey? No, thanks, sir. I don't drink, says the beggar. All right, then take this pack of cigarettes, offers the man. I don't smoke, sir. The rich man tries again. Well, I've got some gambling chips you could use in the casino. I don't gamble either, sir. Undeterred, the man smirks. How about I introduce you to a lovely lady I know? Sir, I'm happily married and love my wife, the beggar replies. The rich man pauses, then pulls a business card from his pocket. Fine, here's my card. Come to my house tomorrow, and I'll introduce you to my wife, and I'll give you all the money you need. The beggar, puzzled, asks, Why do I need to meet your wife, sir? The rich man grins, because I want to show her what happens to a man who doesn't drink, smoke, gamble, or chase women. So a woman noticed her husband standing on the bathroom scale, sucking in his stomach. Ha, that's not going to help, she said. Sure, it does, he said. It's the only way I can see the numbers. So a wealthy, bitter old man died, and at the reading of his will, only 3 people associated with him, his priest, his doctor, and his accountant were present. The lawyer informed them that the old man had no heirs and had aimed to die penniless but hadn't quite succeeded in spending all his money. He'd been instructed to divide the remaining $150,000 among the 3 men he trusted and ensure each portion was placed in his coffin before burial so no one else would benefit from his hard-earned cash. The lawyer handed each a thick bundle of money and concluded the will reading. After the sparsely attended burial service, the 3 men went to a nearby pub for a drink and to discuss the deceased. A very strange and mean-spirited man, said the accountant. Tell me, did you have any qualms about burying him with the money? Well, said the priest, that was a lot of money, and the church roof badly needs repairs. I must confess I kept $5,000 to cover its repair. The doctor then admitted, You know I do a lot of work at the orphanage, and they always need funds, so I withheld $10,000. Gentlemen, said the accountant, I'm surprised such upstanding men as yourselves could be so dishonest. Weren't you tempted? Asked the priest. Not at all, gentlemen, replied the accountant. I put in a check for the full amount. So, 2 hillbillies walk into a restaurant. While having a bite to eat, they talk about their moonshine operation. Suddenly, a woman eating a sandwich at a nearby table begins to cough. After a minute or so, it becomes clear that she is in real distress. One of the hillbillies looks at her and says, Can you swallow? The woman shakes her head no. Then he asks, Can you breathe? The woman, starting to turn blue, shakes her head no. The hillbilly walks over to the woman, lifts up her dress, pulls down her underwear, and quickly licks her right butt cheek with his tongue. The woman is so shocked that she has a violent spasm and the obstruction flies out of her mouth. As she begins to breathe again, the hillbilly walks slowly back to his table. His partner says, "You know, I'd heard of that Heimlich maneuver, but I ain't never seen it done." So, at my last job interview, I was asked what my greatest weakness was, and I said, honesty. The interviewer said, "I don't think honesty is a weakness." I replied, "I don't give a damn what you think." So two rednecks decided they weren't going anywhere in life and thought they should go to college to get ahead. The first goes to see the counselor, who tells him to take math, history, and logic. "What's logic?" the first redneck asks. The counselor answers, "Let me give you an example. Do you own a weed eater?" "I sure do." "Then I can assume, using logic, that you have a yard," replies the counselor. "That's real good," says the redneck. The counselor continues, "Logic also tells me that since you have a yard, you own a house." "Impressed," the redneck says. "Amazing. And since you own a house, logic dictates that you have a wife." "That's Betty Mays?" "This is incredible." The redneck is clearly catching on. "Finally, since you have a wife, I can logically assume you're heterosexual," says the counselor. "You're absolutely right. That's the most fascinating thing I ever heard. I can't wait to take that logic class." The redneck, proud of the new world opening up to him, walks back into the hallway, where his friend is waiting. "So, what classes are you taking?" asks the friend. "Math, history, and logic," replies the first redneck. "What in tarnation is logic?" asks his friend. "Let me give you an example. Do you own a weed eater?" asks the first redneck. "No," his friend replies. "Then you're gay." So Cletus hears his wife hollering outside the shack. "What's wrong?" he asks after rushing outside. His wife points at the outhouse and says, "Get yourself in there, and you'll find out what's wrong." "Okay," he says, and opens the door to the one-holer, looking for anything amiss. "I can't figure out what's wrong in here." "Stick your head in the hole," says his wife. "But wife, why would I want to do a thing like that?" "Now, Cletus, don't give me any of your sass. Go on and stick your head in there." So Cletus does as he's asked, and from the outhouse comes a string of grunting and retching. "Well," asks his wife, "I went and got my beard stuck." "Ah," says his wife, "aggravating, ain't it?" So I asked my wife why she married me. She said, "Because you're so funny and make me laugh so much." I told her I thought it was because I was so good-looking and charming. She replied, "See, you're hilarious." So Maria is a devout Catholic. She gets married and has 12 children. Then her husband dies. She remarries shortly after and has another 15 children by her next husband. Then he dies. A while later, she dies. At the funeral, the priest looks skyward and says, "At least they're finally together." A guy sitting in the front row asks, "Excuse me, Father, but do you mean her and her first husband, or her and her second husband?" The priest says, "I mean her legs." So after a night of drinking, two men decided to stop at the local brothel on the way home. After giving them a look over, the madam pulls the girls aside and says, "Put them each in a room with a blow-up doll. They're that drunk they won't notice." After they were done and walking back home, one of the men turns to the other and says, "I think mine was dead." "Dead," the second replied. "Yeah, she was cold and didn't move or make a sound." The second man then goes, "Well, I think mine was a witch." "What? Why?" The first man replied. "Yeah, a witch. When I bit her ass, she farted in my face and flew out the window." So, a wealthy banker was riding in his limousine when he saw two women along the roadside eating grass. Disturbed, he ordered his driver to stop and he got out to investigate. He asked one woman, "Why you're eating grass?" "We don't have any money for food," the poor woman replied. "We have to eat grass." "Well then, you can come with me to my house and I'll feed you," the banker said. "But sir, I have a husband and 2 children with me." "They are over there, under that tree. Bring them along," the banker replied. Turning to the other poor women, he stated, "You come with us also." The second woman, in a pitiful voice, then said, "But sir, I also have a husband and 6 children with me." "Bring them all as well," the banker answered. They all entered the car, which was no easy task, even for a car as large as the limousine. Once underway, one of the poor fellows turned to the banker and said, "Sir, you are too kind." "Thank you for taking all of us with you," the banker replied. "Glad to do it. You'll really love my place. The grass is almost a foot high." So a down-on-his-luck cowboy is walking down the road. The sole of one of his boots is loose at the toe and clapping every time he takes a step. All of a sudden, a billionaire cattle rancher is driving by and notices the despair on the cowboy's face and his big old flapping boot. He says, "Hey there, son, why the long face?" "Well," says the cowboy, "I just lost my job as a ranch hand. My wife left me, and now my boot decides to come apart on me." The rancher, with a look of sympathy on his face, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a big old roll of cash, takes off the rubber band, and gives it to the cowboy. "Here you go. This should keep that boot from clapping on ya. Good luck." So a guy going into his job watches the owner of the company drive up in a new expensive sports car. The employee says, "That is a really nice car." The owner says to him, "If you work hard, put in the long hours and don't complain, next year I can buy a nicer one." So a man found a lamp on the beach, rubbed it, and out popped a genie. "As you might expect," the genie said, "thank you for releasing me. I grant you 3 wishes." Without hesitation, the man said, "For my first wish, I want you to get a hearing aid." The genie was perplexed and said, "That's an odd wish. May I ask why that?" "Well, I've heard horror stories about wishes before, and I really don't need 1,000,000 ducks or a 12-inch pianist." So there was once a man and woman who had been married for more than 60 years. They had shared everything. They had talked about everything. They had kept no secrets from each other, except that the little old woman had a shoebox in the top of her closet that she had cautioned her husband never to open or ask her about. For all of these years, he had never thought about the box. But one day, the little old woman got very sick and the doctor said she would not recover. In trying to sort out their affairs, the little old man took down the shoebox and took it to his wife's bedside. She agreed that it was time that he should know what was in the box. When he opened it, he found 2 crocheted doilies and a stack of money totaling $25,000. He asked her about the contents. "When we were to be married," she said, "my grandmother told me that the secret of a happy marriage was to never argue. She told me that if I ever got angry with you, I should just keep quiet and crochet a doily." The little old man was so moved, he had to fight back tears. Only 2 precious doilies were in the box. She had only been angry with him 2 times in all those years of living and loving. He said, "But what about all of this money? How did you manage to save all this money?" "Oh," she said, "that's the money I made from selling the doilies." So a couple aged 101 and 98 were about to get a divorce. The judge sadly asks, "Oh, come on now. You've been married for 80 years. Why did you decide to get a divorce?" "I mean, sir," said the woman, "we actually wanted a divorce for a long time, but did not want our children to get upset, so waited for them to die." So a husband and wife get into a heated argument. The wife calls her mom and says, "He fought with me again. I'm coming to stay with you." Her mom replies, "No, dear, he needs to pay for his mistake. I'm coming to stay with you." So a drunk stumbles into a job interview at a brewery. The boss takes an instant dislike to him, but decides to conduct the interview anyway. He signals his secretary to bring a sample of their finest beer. The drunk sniffs it and immediately lists every ingredient perfectly. Impressed, but skeptical, the boss winks at the secretary to bring something else. She returns with a glass of liquid she discreetly prepared in the back. The drunk takes one whiff and says, "Female, 26 years old, 3 months pregnant. And if you don't give me this job, I'll tell your wife who the real father is." So a man came home from work one day to find his wife sitting on the front porch with her bags packed. He asked her where she was going. She replied, "I'm going to Las Vegas." He questioned her as to why. "I just found out that I can make $500 a night doing what I give you for free." He pondered that, then went into the house and packed his bags and returned to the porch. "And just where do you think you're going?" "I'm going with you," he replied. "Why?" she asked. "I want to see how you are going to live on $1,000 a year." So a man steps into a confessional booth and says, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." "Go on, my child, confess your sins," the priest replies. "For the past 6 days, I've been sleeping with women who aren't my wife." "I see," says the priest, "and this fills you with guilt?" "Well, yes, Father, but they're absolutely gorgeous." "Are they more attractive than your wife?" The priest asks. "No way, Father. My wife is stunning too," the man says. "But, how can I be forgiven?" The priest pauses, then says, "Squeeze 10 lemons or limes and drink the juice." "Will that absolve my sins, Father?" the man asks. "No, but it might wipe that smug grin off your face." So a refined gentleman strides into a pub and orders a 25-year-old Scot. The bartender checks his stock but only finds a 20-year-old Scotch. Figuring it's close enough, he pours a glass. The gentleman takes a sip, spits it out, and declares, "This is 20-year-old Scotch. Do you have a 15-year-old port instead?" The bartender searches, but only finds a 10-year-old port. He pours it anyway. The gentleman sips, spits it out again, and snaps, "This is 10-year-old port." At that moment, an old regular at the end of the bar waves the bartender over. The bartender tells the gentleman, "One moment, sir. I'll fix this after I check on that customer." He returns with a glass and says, "This is courtesy of the man at the end of the bar." The gentleman takes a sip, gags, and exclaims, "This tastes like urine." The old regular grins and calls out, "It is Now tell me how old I am. So a sea captain and his ship happened upon a shipwreck with only one survivor, a young girl. He took her aboard and raised her on the ship, intending to marry her when she turned 18. On her 18th birthday, they were married and went to the captain's cabin. He undressed her tenderly and reached for a small bottle of oil. "What's that for?" she asked. "It's so I don't hurt you, dear," he replied. She smiled and said, "Why don't you just spit on it like the rest of the crew does?" So a woman was going to church, but her car unexpectedly broke down. So she called an Uber. When the Uber arrived, she got into the car and, deciding to make small talk, she asked the driver a question, but he didn't answer. Curiously, she tapped him on the shoulder to get his attention, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. He jerked the car to the shoulder of the road, and the car came to a hard stop as he slammed on the brakes. They both gasped in shock from what just happened. The woman caught her breath and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know that touching you on the shoulder would scare you." The driver replied, "It's not your fault. This is my first time driving an Uber. For the past 25 years, I've been driving hearses."